How very lucky are we? You know, our musical guest that we had booked for today wasn't able to make it, and so as late as Friday night, I called our music team and said, you know what, can you figure out something to do? And aren't they fabulous? I mean, not only did they figure out something to do, but it was a great something to do. So good. Let us prepare ourselves. If you put your hand over your eyes, I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
And now your ears, I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
And now over your heart and extend out your arms, I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
I open
My heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
The spiritual truth that I'm working with today is the same one that we did with our affirmation. You can rise again and again and again and again. You know, rising up is the outpicturing of resurrection. The definition of resurrection is life and death and life again. You know, to be resurrected, you have to go to a dying place. In Jesus' case, the Jesus that we honor today during this Easter Sunday morning, his death was a physical death. But more likely for us, the death we need to be looking at is the death of an old pattern of thinking, a pattern of behavior that no longer serves us in our life. And like everything else, resurrection is a choice. It's a choice for us to get up every time we get knocked down, no matter how many times we get knocked down in our life. It's a choice for us to admit that we're in a dying place from which we yearn to be resurrected. In this church, we don't deny that when we're in a dying place, because we know that's where the resurrection will take place. Divorce can feel like a dying place, and I know some of you have experienced that in your life. Maybe some of you are experiencing it right now, but the divorce can be the very dying place from which you resurrect into the perfect relationship just for you. Maybe the dying place for you is going to a job that you hate every single day, but that can be the resurrection when you recognize, I hate this job. That's the resurrection moment in which you can begin to build a time to look for a new job in your life. Maybe you need to resurrect from a scary diagnosis, and you can. People have and are continuing to do that. Maybe you have a child at risk. You can resurrect from that experience. Maybe you're broke right now. You can resurrect from being broke right now. Maybe you're feeling stuck. A lot of us are feeling stuck in this time of sheltering in place. You can resurrect from that moment. You know, what we have to do, though, is to hold on to those ears that a minute ago, we agreed to open up. We have to keep them open, because the dying place is a very, very, very good place for us to be. Usually it's not a fun place. Very often it's a scary place for us to be. Not always does it make us look very impressive when we're in the dying place, and almost never in this dying place is it somewhere we consciously said that we were going to go. But the only place from which you can rise again is the dying place. It's the resurrection place. This country is in a dying place right now. But if we can elevate the love that was Jesus' primary message, we can rise again stronger and stronger and be even better than before. You know, this is a very powerful virus that's causing serious physical and mental, and in many cases financial pain for people in this country and really on the planet. And it's also a catalyst for so much love that I see happening right now around us. You know, I am so proud of our governor and the governor of Washington, who said, look, you know what, we're in trouble too, but our trouble isn't as bad as your trouble is right now. So with love, I'm sending you what you need. That's love. You know, I see right now, I read stories right now of ambulance drivers working 12-hour shift, being exhausted from that experience, and yet rolling up their sleeves, stepping back into the emergency rooms to help their colleagues to finish out shifts. I see teachers creating parades up and down streets where they know their children live, to honk and wave and yell at them and just let them know that they're thinking about them. That's love we have going on right now. I see neighbors delivering hot meals to other elderly neighbors right now. That's love that's coming out of this experience. That's resurrection love. You know, some religions believe that Jesus died for their sins. In this religion, we believe that Jesus lived for our life, lived for us to be happy, to be abundant, and to be loving people on the planet. The true purpose of Jesus was to awaken in us, to resurrect in us an expression of a higher love than we've ever expressed before in our life. See, Jesus' message wasn't about whether we should dance or not dance, whether we should play cards or not play cards, whether we should marry same-sex people or not marry same-sex people. That wasn't his message. His message to us was a resurrection of the heart. Jesus knew that love could rise us above the darkness and the suffering of humanity and actually heal it. And this country needs healing right now. We know that communities of color are being hit the hardest from this virus. And it's not because this virus attacked some races and not others. It's because certain races in this country have had to deal with substantial, substandard health care in their communities. They've had to deal with substandard opportunities for good nutrition, good grocery stores in their community. They've had to deal with an economic oppression in this country. Jesus knew that love could rise us up above the darkness and the suffering of humanity and begin to heal it. See, love of people of all races, people of color's lives matter for everybody. And when we get that at a deep enough level, that will stimulate action. That will stimulate the money that we need to take care of those situations. We know right now that Asian people are being victimized by violence, and so are their children, are finding themselves victims of violence because somebody said the absurd term, the China flu. And because they said the absurd term, the China flu, other people bought into that and thought it was Chinese people's fault. It's not anybody's fault. Jesus knew that love could rise us above the darkness and the suffering of humanity and heal it in our lives. Jesus' time here was about life. It wasn't about death. But somehow Christians at some point kind of took a wrong turn on this idea. It's interesting. I learned about a book this last week from a colleague, Roger Teal, from the Colorado church. And the book is called Saving Paradise: How Christians Traded Love of This World for Crucifixion and Empire. And in it, they tell the story of many, many theologians who studied art on church walls. And what they found out was the first 1,000 years after the first Easter Sunday, the first 1,000 years after Jesus died, that the art on church walls was of Jesus with little children, with Jesus with sweet animals, with Jesus in community of loving people. And then about year 1000 AD, they took all that art away and they replaced it with crosses on the wall and pictures of Jesus with thorns and blood coming out and nails in hands and other images that were images of death, not of life, of pain, not of success and happiness in this life. It seems that the Christians who were the closest to Jesus, the first 1,000 years after Jesus, they kind of got what Jesus was about. And then somehow they took a turn. We knew that Jesus could help us rise above the darkness and the suffering of humanity and begin to heal it. So Although his teachings were about love and about life more than about death, we can't ignore the fact that Jesus was crucified. And we are some ways living in a global crucifixion right now of life as we knew it. So let's look at what the love Jesus had in his teachings at the time of his crucifixion. First of all, he did not stick his head in the sand about what was going on. He knew that he was in for a very painful crucifixion. He knew he was in the dying place. And he didn't stop teaching while he was in the dying place, and that's a lesson for us. We are in kind of a crucifixion, and we need to even love harder and stronger while we're in this time. He knew he had to hold on through it all. He knew that even in his pain, he had to keep teaching. He had to keep bringing what his gift was. We have to do that through our time. We have to find creative ways in our life so that we can begin to shelter in place, but doing it in a more creative way to help one another in our life. You will notice that Jesus helped other people even in the worst of his crucifixion. There were guys hanging on crosses on either side of him, and he reached out to them in love. He reached out to them in compassion. He reached out to them in hope. You and I have to begin to do that with people that we've lost track of. Now is the time to get on the phone and call them up and just tell them, I love you. How's it going? What are you doing? What's great about this? What's hard about this? It takes a few minutes. But Jesus could do it on the cross. We can do it while we're stuck in the house. Jesus continued to teach, even in the dying place. We have to be even more creative than we ever were before. We have to learn how to cook meals in this dying place without going to the store very often. We need to learn how to teach kids new math that we don't even understand ourselves to help them with their work. We need to celebrate our friends' and family's birthday through Zoom and other ways from a distance, because we know that we need to love stronger in our lives. But maybe you're not in the dying place, or you don't know you're in the dying place, but you need to know you're in the dying place. You need to go to a dying place in your life. Jesus knew that his fleshly body had to end in order to be able to begin his heavenly journey, in order to restore him to glory. Some of us need to create a dying place for our addiction so that we can rise again as people with self-respect. Some of us need to create a dying place for our poverty so we can rise again as people who are abundant. Some of us need to create a dying place for our loneliness so we can connect with others in our life and rise up. You cannot get to a resurrection without the dying place. The dying place can be dark. And sometimes we can actually think we're in the dying place. But hear me, your soul is never buried. Your spirit is never, ever buried. Maybe what's being buried in you is what needs to die so you can rise again. I don't know what it is for you, but this Easter, if you spend a moment thinking, what has to die for me to be resurrected to my full glory, to my heavenly journey in my life, I know you'll find it. And if you're in the dying place alone, that's on you. See, the dying place for Jesus was a very public event. You have people who want to be with you. I'm not talking about carrying the cross around with your friends and your family, but I am saying let this be part of the Easter story that was a public event be in your consciousness if you're in the dying place. Call a practitioner if you're in a dying place. Call a family member or a trusted friend if you're in the dying place. Let others hold the truth for you while you can't hold it for yourself. Just like in this pandemic, we're holding the truth for one another. In Washington and California, we're holding the truth for people in New Orleans and people in New York and people in Pennsylvania. We're holding the truth for them. Jesus cried out from the cross, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? I don't know about you, but I've asked that question. In the last 12 months, I've said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And I found people who will help me hold on while I'm going through that experience. Jesus' final words is, Father, it's over. Into your hands I commit my spirit. Great Mother, it's over. Allah, it's over. Higher power, it's over. God of my understanding, it's over. I'm letting go of the fear. I'm letting go of the doubt. I'm letting go of the insecurities. No condition can harm me. No person can harm me when I'm in alignment with Spirit, when I choose resurrection, when I choose love. I'm not letting go of my history. Principle is never bound by precedent. That's kind of a churchy way of saying, my past doesn't define my future. I define my future by how closely I'm aligned to spiritual principle, by how closely I'm aligned to God in my life. It doesn't matter how many times I was arrested. It doesn't matter how many times I was fired. It doesn't matter how many times I was turned down for a date. It doesn't matter how many times I fell short of making that commitment that I made to myself. Today I choose love. Today I choose resurrection in my life. I'm going to let go of petty judgment and resentments. Some of those resentments, I'm not even sure how they got to be, but I still am carrying them around. I let them go today because it's Easter, and I'm a resurrection person. I'm an Easter person. In the Easter story in the Gospel of Luke, after the resurrection, Jesus says, there is forgiveness of sins for all who turn to me. Now, a lot of times people misunderstand that and think they're talking about the person Jesus. What Jesus was saying, there is forgiveness of sins for all who turn to the Christ consciousness, for all who are willing to let go of the resentment and be with the presence of God that is within them. I choose forgiveness because I choose resurrection in my life. When I talk about resurrection, I'm not talking about improving your life. I'm talking about reinventing yourself. I'm talking about creating a self that your family and your friends may not even recognize. You know, part of the story is that Jesus was walking along the road after the resurrection, and his followers were talking about him as if he wasn't even there. Why? Because they couldn't see him. They couldn't recognize him. They were so caught up in the drama of the crucifixion. They were so caught up in the horrors of the crucifixion, they couldn't even imagine it was possible for him to be with them. They couldn't fathom it. Sometimes recovering alcoholics are not recognizable because people got so caught up in the drunkalogue. People got so caught up in the history and the stories of what they used to be like that they couldn't imagine the people cleaned up their act. Those of you have resurrected. People who take diet and exercise seriously in this life sometimes aren't recognized by their family and friends who haven't seen them for a while. But they have resurrected themselves. People who learn and practice spiritual principles of abundance, sometimes they're not recognized because people are so caught up in the drama of their poverty stories that they had at one point. People don't recognize the people who've stopped awfulizing because the expectation is they'll always awfulize in their life. You can rise up and be the person you want to become. Resurrection is making a choice. And after you make that choice, the universe will give you the next step. You don't have to worry about it. You may stumble, but you will never fall all the way down. My favorite part of the Easter story always comes from the Gospel of Mark. Jesus is resurrected. He's back to life. And he says to Mary, go and tell my disciples, and Peter especially, that I will meet him in Galilee. See, Peter was a disciple. All he had to say is go and tell my disciples. But he singled out Peter because he knew that Peter was ashamed. He knew that Peter was embarrassed. See, go and tell even Peter, who denounced me, who betrayed me. Go and tell even Peter that there is a place for him in my life. You and I, sometimes we have to reach out to the Peters, the people who betrayed us, the liars in our life, the ones who didn't stand up for us in our life when it wasn't convenient. We have to bring those Peters back into our life if we want to fully resurrect. Tell the one who doesn't understand how hard your workload is and makes your office, a day at the office, a hell. Tell that one, come on. Tell the person who flirted with your partner, come on. Tell the person who borrowed money and forgot to pay it back, come on and be with me. Tell the person who broke that confidence that you shared with them. Maybe you told them a secret that you didn't want anybody else to know and they just blabbed it. That one, tell that one, come on back in. When we become resurrected, we have that generosity of spirit that continues to draw the circle bigger and bigger. The circle of inclusion. Nobody gets left out. Because we know finally, when we're resurrected, we know finally there is no other. There's only one of us. We understand on some level that until the choice for resurrection is made by everybody, none of us can fully be resurrected. We can improve, but we can't fully be resurrected until the least of us comes to the table. Let us honor the resurrection of the Christ presence within each of us by making that choice. First, to recognize when we're in the dying place and to not be afraid of it, but to rejoice. Oh, I'm in the dying place. I can see something needs to leave for me to become the person I want to become. And secondly, speak a word of intention. You're in the dying place. You can't figure out how to get out of it. Don't worry about it. Simply speak a word of intention. I intend to resurrect from this moment. That is my intention. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but that is my intention. And then throw all the love you have at it in your life, because that's what Jesus did. The power that Christ Jesus is in you right now. You are a resurrected person. Allow that to show through. Let's take this Easter message into prayer. There is only one power. It is the power that not only runs through me and runs through every person in this team bringing this message to you, but it also runs through the lives of every single person. The people who are on ventilators right now, God is right where they are. The people who are exhausted from providing health care right now, God is right where you are. God is right where every single person is. I give thanks for that. I don't really need to say anything more. I just simply give thanks from the bottom of my heart. I give thanks to all beings who turn to love. And so it is.